The Bible is not just a collection of sacred texts. It is a vivid tapestry of human history, filled with stories of triumph and tragedy, love and betrayal. Among these tales are the stories of 5 women whose actions altered the course of history. These women were not just figures in the background. They were key players, wielding influence and power in ways that shook kingdoms and changed lives forever. The Bible is filled with stories of remarkable figures, heroes of faith, champions of righteousness, and women whose courage shaped the course of history. But hidden among these tales are the stories of women who wielded their power in ways that left behind a trail of destruction and infamy. These women were dangerous not because of brute strength but because of their cunning, ambition, and willingness to defy God's laws. In this series, we will explore the lives of these 5 women, their choices, their consequences, and their legacies. They were dangerous not just because of their actions, but because of the ripples those actions sent through history. Stay with us as we delve into the lives of these fascinating women, unveiling their secrets, understanding their motivations, and reflecting on the lessons they teach us today. Before we begin their individual stories, let us introduce the 5 women who left an indelible mark on biblical history. 1. Athaliah, the ruthless queen who seized the throne of Judah and massacred her own family to secure her power. 2. Herodias, the vengeful wife of Herod Antipas, whose demand for John the Baptist's head shocked history. 3. Delilah, the beautiful seductress who betrayed Samson, Israel's strongest man, for silver. 4. Jezebel, the infamous queen who brought Baal worship to Israel, leading her nation into idolatry and bloodshed. 5. Eve, the first woman whose fateful decision to eat the forbidden fruit brought sin into the world. These women lived in vastly different times and circumstances, yet their actions share common threads of ambition, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of disobedience. Now, let us begin with the story of the first woman, Athaliah. 1. Athaliah, the bloodthirsty queen. In the southern kingdom of Judah, a queen rose to power whose reign was marked by bloodshed and terror. Athaliah, the daughter of Jezebel and Ahab, inherited her mother's ruthlessness and her father's disregard for God. Married into the royal family of Judah, Athaliah brought with her the idolatry of her parents, turning the people away from Yahweh. When her son, King Ahaziah, was killed, Athaliah saw an opportunity to seize the throne for herself. But there was one obstacle: the royal heirs. In an unprecedented act of cruelty, Athaliah ordered the massacre of all the king's descendants, including her own grandchildren. The streets of Jerusalem ran red with the blood of innocents, and Athaliah declared herself queen. Unbeknownst to her, one child survived. Joash, a baby boy, was hidden by his aunt Jehosheba, the wife of the high priest Jehoiada. For 6 years, Joash was kept safe in the temple of the Lord, away from Athaliah's reach. During her reign, Athaliah desecrated the temple, replacing the worship of Yahweh with that of Baal. Her tyranny plunged Judah into spiritual and political darkness. But Jehoiada, the high priest, was quietly preparing to overthrow her. In the 7th year of her reign, Jehoiada revealed Joash to the people. The boy, now 7 years old, was anointed king in a secret ceremony. Trumpets blared, and the people shouted, "Long live the king!" Athaliah, hearing the commotion, rushed to the temple. When she saw the boy standing beside the pillar, crowned and surrounded by guards, she tore her robes and screamed, "Treason! Treason!" But her cries fell on deaf ears. Jehoiada ordered her capture, and she was dragged from the temple and executed. Joash's ascension marked the end of Athaliah's bloody reign and the restoration of true worship in Judah. Athaliah's story is a stark reminder of the destructive nature of unchecked ambition. Her willingness to kill her own family for power led to her downfall and tarnished her legacy. Yet, even in the darkest times, God's plan prevailed, ensuring the survival of the Davidic line through Joash. Athaliah's ascent to power was a chilling display of ambition. After her son's death, she orchestrated a massacre of the royal family, ensuring no one could challenge her rule. But her ruthlessness was matched by Jehoshaphat's courage, who hid the infant Joash in the temple. So here's the twist. Imagine Athaliah discovering hints of Joash's survival, a fleeting glimpse of the boy or a whispered rumor among the people. Her paranoia could have driven her to desperate acts, making her eventual downfall even more dramatic. To Herodias, the palace of Herod Antipas gleamed under the blazing sun, a symbol of Roman authority in the province of Galilee. Herodias, the queen of Galilee and Perea, walked its marble halls with an air of regal confidence. She was a woman of ambition, beauty, and cunning, whose rise to power came at a great moral cost. Herodias had once been married to Herod Philip, the brother of Herod Antipas. Their union had been one of convenience, tying two branches of the Herodian dynasty together. But when Herod Antipas visited their home, Herodias saw an opportunity for greater influence. She divorced her husband and married Antipas, a move that defied Jewish law and outraged the public. One voice rose above the murmurs of discontent: John the Baptist. Known for his fiery sermons and unshakable faith, John was a prophet who feared no earthly power. He openly condemned Herodias and Herod Antipas, declaring their marriage unlawful. "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife," John proclaimed, his voice echoing through the crowds. Herodias' hatred for John burned fiercely. How dare he, a wandering preacher, question her authority and the legitimacy of her marriage? Herod, though troubled by John's accusations, respected the prophet and feared the public's reaction should any harm come to him. But Herodias would not be silenced. Her chance came during Herod's lavish birthday banquet. The palace was filled with nobles, military commanders, and dignitaries, all feasting and drinking in celebration. Amid the revelry, Herodias' daughter, Salome, entered the hall. She was young, beautiful, and graceful, and her mother had instructed her well. Salome began to dance, her movements captivating the room. Herod and his guests watched in awe as she performed with a mixture of elegance and seduction. When she finished, the hall erupted in applause. Herod, drunk with wine and admiration, called out, "Ask me for anything you want, and I'll give it to you, up to half my kingdom." Salome turned to her mother, who leaned in and whispered instructions. Salome returned to Herod with her request. "I want you to give me, right now, the head of John the Baptist on a platter." The hall fell silent. Herod's face paled as he realized the gravity of the request. He respected John and knew he was a righteous man. But his pride, coupled with his rash oath in front of his guests, left him trapped. Reluctantly, he nodded to the executioner. John, imprisoned in the fortress of Machaerus, awaited his fate with calm resolve. The clanging of keys signaled the arrival of his executioner. John's life ended that night, his head brought to Salome on a silver platter and delivered to Herodias. Herodias' victory was complete, but it came at a high cost. Though she silenced John's voice, her legacy became one of infamy. Her name is forever tied to the gruesome execution of a man who spoke truth to power. Herodias is a chilling example of how pride and vengeance can corrupt the human heart. She allowed her desire for control to overshadow her sense of morality, leading to one of the most shocking events in the Bible. John the Baptist's death stands as a testament to the cost of standing for truth, even in the face of dangerous opposition. Herodias was driven by pride and a thirst for power. Her union with Herod Antipas scandalized Judea, and John the Baptist's public condemnation of their marriage stung her deeply. Herodias plotted John's demise with precision, using her daughter Salome as a pawn in her deadly game. So here's the twist. What if Salome, after delivering her mother's gruesome request, began to question her role in the execution? Imagine the tension between mother and daughter as Salome grapples with guilt, while Herodias struggles to maintain her composure amid growing whispers of dissent in the palace. 3. Delilah, the betrayer with a sweet smile. The valley of Sorek, nestled between the rolling hills of Philistia and Israel, was a place of striking beauty. Its fertile land was dotted with vineyards and olive groves, and traders often passed through its bustling villages. Among the locals was a woman whose name would forever be etched in infamy: Delilah. Delilah's beauty was legendary. Her raven-black hair cascaded down her back, and her eyes, dark and captivating, seemed to hold secrets that no one could uncover. Men were drawn to her like moths to a flame, and she had mastered the art of using her allure to her advantage. But behind her enchanting smile lay a calculating mind, always seeking opportunities to secure wealth and power. Her encounter with Samson, Israel's strongest man, was no accident. Samson was a Nazirite, set apart by God from birth to deliver Israel from the Philistines. His incredible strength had made him a hero among his people and a menace to the Philistines. However, Samson had a weakness. His desire for Philistine women often led him astray. When Samson arrived in the valley of Sorek, he quickly caught sight of Delilah. Her beauty was intoxicating, and he fell for her almost instantly. Delilah, recognizing his infatuation, welcomed his attention. To Samson, Delilah was a dream. To her, he was an opportunity. Word of their relationship reached the Philistine rulers, who saw a chance to neutralize their greatest enemy. They approached Delilah with an irresistible offer. "Find out the secret of his great strength," they said, "so we can overpower him and subdue him. Each of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver." Delilah's eyes widened at the mention of silver. The wealth they promised was beyond her wildest dreams. Though she had no personal vendetta against Samson, her greed outweighed any feelings she might have had for him. She agreed to their plan, her mind already racing with ways to extract his secret. That evening, as Samson lay beside her, Delilah began her manipulation. Running her fingers through his thick, dark hair, she whispered, "Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued." Samson laughed, amused by her question. "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man," he said. Delilah smiled, but her mind churned with frustration. She tested his claim by tying him with bowstrings while he slept. But when the Philistines rushed in to capture him, Samson snapped the strings effortlessly. The following nights followed a similar pattern. Delilah pleaded with him, using tears and accusations. "How can you say, 'I love you,' when you won't confide in me? You've made a fool of me 3 times now." Samson's defenses weakened under her relentless pressure. He cared for Delilah, but her persistence chipped away at his resolve. Finally, after days of her coaxing, he revealed the truth. "No razor has ever been used on my head," he admitted. "I have been a Nazirite dedicated to God from birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." Delilah's heart raced with triumph. That night, as Samson slept with his head on her lap, she signaled a man to shave off his 7 braids. Slowly and deliberately, the blades cut through his hair, severing not just his locks but the symbol of his divine covenant. When the Philistines stormed in, Samson awoke and tried to fight, but his strength had left him. They seized him, gouged out his eyes, and bound him in bronze shackles. The mighty judge of Israel was reduced to a blind prisoner, grinding grain in the prison of his enemies. As Delilah counted her silver, she felt a flicker of unease. Samson's cries of betrayal echoed in her mind, but she quickly silenced them with the clink of coins. Her betrayal had secured her wealth, but her legacy would be one of treachery. Delilah's encounter with Samson seemed fated. The strongest man in Israel fell for her beauty, unaware that her heart was torn between love and greed. The Philistine leaders saw her as their greatest weapon, offering her unimaginable wealth to betray Samson. But Delilah's path wasn't straightforward. What if she hesitated, torn between her growing affection for Samson and the pressure of the Philistine rulers? Imagine her struggling with guilt after each failed attempt to uncover his secret. When she finally succeeded, her triumph was bittersweet, as she realized the cost of her betrayal. So here's the twist. After Samson's capture, Delilah could have faced backlash from the Philistines, who doubted her loyalty despite her success. Or perhaps she secretly visited Samson in prison, seeking his forgiveness in a moment of vulnerability. Delilah's story is a tragic reminder of the consequences of misplaced trust and unchecked greed. Samson, though flawed, was chosen by God for a great purpose, yet his weakness for Delilah led to his downfall. For Delilah, the price of betrayal was not just Samson's suffering, but her eternal reputation as a symbol of deceit. For Jezebel, the sun beat down on the bustling city of Sidon, a powerful Phoenician port city known for its wealth and devotion to Baal, the storm god. In the palace of King Ethbal, Jezebel grew up surrounded by opulence and pagan rituals. Her father, a former priest of Baal turned king, had instilled in her a fierce devotion to the god of her ancestors. From a young age, Jezebel was taught that strength and cunning were necessary to maintain power. She learned the art of manipulation, the importance of alliances, and the ruthlessness required to rule. Jezebel's marriage to Ahab, the king of Israel, was not one of love but of political strategy. It was a union meant to solidify ties between Israel and Phoenicia, bringing trade, wealth, and influence to both nations. As Jezebel stepped into the palace of Samaria, Israel's capital, she brought with her not only her beauty, but also her unwavering allegiance to Baal. Ahab, a weak and impressionable man, quickly fell under Jezebel's spell. Her fiery personality and sharp intellect were unlike anything he had encountered. She saw in him a vessel for her ambitions and wasted no time asserting her influence. Under her guidance, altars to Baal were erected, and an elaborate temple was constructed in Samaria. Jezebel ensured that her god would not only be worshipped but also dominate the religious landscape of Israel. But Jezebel was not content with mere religious conversion. She viewed the worship of Yahweh as a direct threat to her power and sought to eradicate it entirely. The prophets of God became her primary targets. She ordered their execution, turning Israel into a land of fear and bloodshed. Those who resisted her decrees were hunted down, and those who supported her reign were richly rewarded. In this climate of terror, one man stood defiantly against her: Elijah, the prophet of God. Elijah's boldness in proclaiming the truth infuriated Jezebel, but she underestimated his resolve. When Elijah confronted Ahab, declaring a drought as punishment for Israel's idolatry, Jezebel's hatred for the prophet deepened. For 3 years, the land withered under Elijah's prophecy, and Jezebel's wrath burned hotter with each passing day. The most dramatic confrontation came on Mount Carmel, where Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal to a public showdown. Hundreds of Jezebel's priests gathered, performing elaborate rituals and crying out to Baal for fire to consume their sacrifice. From morning till evening, they shouted, danced, and even slashed themselves, but Baal remained silent. Elijah, mocking their efforts, stepped forward and prayed to Yahweh. Fire fell from heaven, consuming the sacrifice, the altar, and even the water surrounding it. The people of Israel fell to their knees, crying, "The Lord, He is God." Word of Elijah's victory reached Jezebel, and her fury was unparalleled. "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them," she vowed. Her threats forced Elijah to flee into the wilderness, but Jezebel's grip on Israel remained firm. One of Jezebel's most infamous acts was her involvement in the death of Naboth, a righteous man who owned a vineyard near Ahab's palace. Ahab desired the vineyard, but Naboth refused to sell it, citing the laws of God. Jezebel saw this as an insult to the crown and took matters into her own hands. She devised a chilling plan, forging letters in Ahab's name and accusing Naboth of blasphemy and treason. Her scheme worked flawlessly. Naboth was falsely convicted and stoned to death, and Ahab took possession of the vineyard. Jezebel's cold-blooded manipulation shocked even the elders of Israel, but no one dared to oppose her. Her reign of terror eventually drew the judgment of God. The prophet Elijah confronted Ahab, declaring, "This is what the Lord says. In the place where dogs licked up Naboth's blood, dogs will lick up your blood. Yes, yours." He also prophesied Jezebel's grisly end, stating that dogs would devour her body near the walls of Jezreel. Years later, Elijah's prophecy came to pass. Ahab was killed in battle, and Jezebel's son, Joram, inherited the throne. But the rise of Jehu, a fierce military commander anointed by God, marked the end of her dynasty. As Jehu stormed Jezreel, Jezebel prepared for her final confrontation. She adorned herself with royal makeup, her eyes lined with kohl and her lips painted a deep crimson. Standing defiantly at the palace window, she called out to Jehu, mocking him with biting words. Jehu was unmoved. "Who is on my side?" he shouted. At his command, Jezebel's own servants threw her from the window. Her body hit the ground with a sickening thud, and horses trampled her remains. When the soldiers returned to bury her, they found only her skull, hands, and feet. The rest had been devoured by dogs, just as Elijah had foretold. Jezebel's death marked the end of an era, but her legacy of wickedness remains a cautionary tale. She is remembered not only for her beauty and ambition, but also for her defiance of God and the devastating consequences of her actions. Jezebel's story begins in Sidon, where she learned the ruthless tactics of her father, Ethbaal. As a child, she witnessed the blood sacrifices made to Baal, instilling in her a deep loyalty to the pagan god. Her marriage to Ahab was calculated, a union meant to extend her father's influence into Israel. But Jezebel's ambition didn't stop at political power. She sought to erase Yahweh from Israel, replacing him with Baal. Her persecution of the prophets and manipulation of Ahab culminated in her orchestration of Naboth's death, securing a vineyard for her husband but sealing her legacy as one of the most wicked women in history. The twist: what if Jezebel faced secret opposition within her palace? Imagine a trusted servant who secretly reported her schemes to Elijah, creating a tense game of cat and mouse. Or perhaps Jezebel herself doubted Baal after the fire from heaven on Mount Carmel, but hid her fear behind an even fiercer devotion. 5 Eve. The world was perfect. The skies were a brilliant blue, the rivers sparkled like diamonds, and the Garden of Eden was filled with vibrant flowers, lush greenery, and the harmonious sounds of animals. In this paradise, Eve lived with her husband, Adam. They were the pinnacle of God's creation, crafted in his image and entrusted with the care of the earth. Eve marveled at the beauty around her. Every fruit in the garden was hers to enjoy, save one. In the center of the garden stood the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, a symbol of God's authority and trust. His command was clear: you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die. At first, the command seemed simple. There were so many other trees, so much abundance. But over time, Eve found her eyes wandering to the forbidden tree. Why would God forbid its fruit? It was just as beautiful, perhaps even more so, than the others. One day, as Eve walked near the tree, she noticed a serpent coiled around its branches. It was no ordinary serpent. It seemed to shimmer with intelligence, its eyes gleaming as it observed her. Did God really say, "You must not eat from any tree in the garden?" the serpent asked, its voice smooth and enticing. Eve paused, startled. "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden," she replied, "but God did say, 'You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die.'" The serpent chuckled softly. "You will not certainly die," it whispered, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Eve hesitated. The serpent's words awakened something within her, a desire for wisdom, for more than what she already had. She looked at the fruit again. It was beautiful, glistening in the sunlight, and its scent was intoxicating. Could it really be as dangerous as God had said? Reaching out, her fingers brushed the smooth surface of the fruit. Her heart pounded as she plucked it from the branch. For a moment, she hesitated, but then she brought it to her lips and took a bite. A rush of sensations overwhelmed her. Her eyes widened as she turned to Adam, offering him the fruit. He too ate, and in that moment everything changed. Their innocence was gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of shame. They saw their nakedness for the first time and scrambled to cover themselves with fig leaves. When God's voice echoed through the garden, "Where are you?" fear gripped them. They hid among the trees, trembling. God's sorrow was evident as he questioned them. "Who told you that you were naked?" "Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" Adam blamed Eve, and Eve blamed the serpent, but the damage was done. The consequences of their disobedience were profound. God pronounced judgment. Pain in childbirth for Eve, toil and hardship for Adam, and banishment from the garden for both. Yet, even in this moment of judgment, there was hope. God promised that one day, the offspring of the woman would crush the serpent's head. This was the first glimmer of redemption, a promise that would echo through history. Eve's story is one of tragedy and consequence, but it is also the beginning of the story of salvation. Her decision set the stage for humanity's need for a savior, a need that would be fulfilled in Jesus Christ. In the idyllic paradise of Eden, Eve lived a life of peace and harmony, free from pain or death. But curiosity burned within her. When the serpent appeared, his cunning words chipped away at her trust in God. Eve's decision to eat the forbidden fruit was not immediate. It was a gradual unraveling of faith. What began as a harmless conversation became a moment that would alter the fate of humanity forever. After Adam joined her in disobedience, their eyes were opened to their nakedness and shame. Banished from Eden, they faced the harsh reality of a world marred by sin. Yet, even in their exile, God's promise of redemption lingered, a seed of hope planted amidst the thorns of regret. So here's the twist. What if Eve hesitated longer, hearing echoes of God's command in her mind? The serpent could have intensified his manipulation, perhaps even involving Adam in the deception, creating a dynamic where trust between them was fractured even before the fall. Though these women lived in different times and places, their stories are united by recurring themes: the pursuit of power, the seduction of sin, and the consequences of disobedience. Imagine their legacies influencing future generations. Athaliah, for instance, following the example of her mother, Jezebel, or Herodias' actions echoing Delilah's betrayal. Eve, Jezebel, Delilah, Herodias, and Athaliah stand out as the 5 most dangerous women in biblical history. Their stories are interconnected not just by their actions but by the ripple effects of their choices, which echo through generations. As their stories unfold, we'll witness betrayal, manipulation, and rebellion, but also the undeniable hand of God, working to bring redemption even in the darkest moments. Finally, what if their stories were narrated from the perspectives of those they wronged? Naboth, Samson, John the Baptist, or those who witnessed their deeds, such as palace servants or prophets. This could add depth and highlight the broader impact of their actions. With these expanded narratives, we have unraveled the lives of the 5 most dangerous women in the Bible. Each story is rich with lessons about morality, ambition, and the consequences of human choices.